All right. I'm super excited for today's interview. This is my first face-to-face interview that I've actually recorded video and audio. And so today we have a lactation consultant on, Naya Weber. Naya, can you just tell us who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm a board certified lactation consultant in Austin, Texas, and I'm also a mom of two. My own difficult journey with breastfeeding kind of helped me figure out what I wanted to be when I grow up. And so I began the journey to become a lactation consultant 5 years ago. And I just recently sat for the board exam and certified, but this is something that's been a passion for a long time.
So that's why you actually got started. So you had some issues breastfeeding. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. My oldest son, who is going to be 8 later this year, he was born a little bit premature. He's what they call a late-term preemie. He was born at 36 and a half weeks. And so while he could breathe fine on his own, he left the hospital with us. I didn't quite realize how tired he was, especially when he was feeding at the breast, because lactation and breastfeeding is a lot of work for a new baby, whether they're preterm or full term, but especially so if a baby is a little bit preterm. So he ended up just being at the breast, and I thought he was doing a great job breastfeeding and nursing, but he wasn't. He ended up losing a lot of weight, and I had to do quite a bit in the early weeks of motherhood to increase my milk supply, make sure my baby was getting fed, and things like that. So I just started learning more and more about lactation. I thought the whole process was just fascinating, the way our bodies are kind of designed to do this and to make milk to sustain life, or in addition to sustaining life, for 40-ish weeks after pregnancy. And as I kind of got to learn more about it, I realized that this is what I wanted to do full time. So I obtained all of the classes and all of the certification hours needed while working full time in a job that had absolutely nothing to do with breastfeeding. And so everything was done on nights and weekends, and with the support of my wonderful husband, without whom I would not be here today for sure.
That's awesome. And you also have a really cool, which is how I found you, a really cool Instagram page that you kind of share some breastfeeding stuff as well. So can you just kind of say, before we get into like the questions regarding breastfeeding, what kind of stuff do you do within being a lactation consultant? You run an Instagram page, and what other things do you do?
Sure. I work as a contractor for an established practice here in South Austin. And so I see moms after they've been released from the hospital, typically anywhere between a couple of days to even several months postpartum. They may be running into issues like milk supply, sore nipples, a lot of that. So a lot of what I do is just kind of helping them navigate through these early challenges of motherhood, and really making sure that I'm meeting the mom and the family where they are in order to support their lactation goals. So I do that, but in addition to that, I do a lot of work with area nonprofits, and especially in the promotion and support of breastfeeding. I'm on the board of the Central Texas Breastfeeding Coalition. I do some work for the Texas Breastfeeding Coalition as well. And then I've also recently started being a volunteer with a group called Partners in Parenting, and they are a group that really is wonderful. I wish I had it when we moved to Austin, but they set up neighborhood groups for families, and everybody's children are around the same age. So Austin is a city of transplants. There's always people moving here, and those people that are moving here are falling in love, getting married, and having babies. Not necessarily in that order, but sometimes they need a little bit of help in finding their village, or finding the people to surround them with as they go through parenthood.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was telling Naya before we started recording that I actually am a member of a military wives page. And so I kind of just wanted to really reach out to either pregnant women or new mothers or mothers who have been through the breastfeeding realm, and like what kind of questions they had that they wish they had answered when they were breastfeeding, or what questions they have for future breastfeeding. And so I just figured we could kind of go down a little list and just, go over some of the most common questions that I saw people really asking.
Sure. I'd love that.
What are some of the best ways for pumping whenever you're not a big producer? A lot of women I saw saying that they had a great time when baby was actually 2 breasts, but once they started pumping, their milk supply went down drastically.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a very common concern that I hear with moms, a lot of the moms that I see as well, especially as they return back to work, the stress of trying to find a new normal with a new baby and going back to work and trying to be, a good mom and a good wife and a good employee. All of those things can really impact everything, including a woman's milk supply. So something really important to keep in mind, and this is something I found myself telling clients more and more lately, I know on social media, we see the posts of the women who donate gallons of breast milk and they have hyperlactation where they make so much milk. That is the exception. That's not the norm. Most women are only going to make enough milk for their baby or babies and maybe a little bit extra, but not to the point where they're able to donate hundreds of ounces to other women. That being said, if you feel like your supply has dropped a little bit with the pump, one thing that you can do that's really helpful is to get hands-on when you're pumping by doing breast compressions when you have letdown, or by massaging the breast, or even using a hot compress or a warm compress. Mm-hmm. When pumping, you can help maximize your milk output, which in turn will tell your body to make more milk, and it should help you maintain your supply.
I've also heard a lot of people say things like having like a piece of clothing or a blanket or a picture. Do those things help as well?
Yes, absolutely. I actually had a really good girlfriend who, when she went back to work, she was at home on maternity leave. She actually took videos of her nursing her son from this angle. And so when she was at work, she'd watch the videos, and it was almost like she was looking down at her own baby. And so pumping, especially when you are away from your baby, whether you're in the military or whether you go back to work, it's so much of a mind thing, and trying to get your body to let down and to release for something that's not your warm, snuggly baby. Just like you said, smelling a piece of your baby's clothing, watching videos of them, looking at pictures of them, even videos of them crying sometimes can help trigger that letdown. For me personally, looking at pictures and watching videos of my son when I went back to work really helped with my milk production.
Wow, that's a really, really smart idea, though. The whole angle and like an illusion. Moms wanted to know too about pumping. How much milk does the baby really need, like while you're away, as far as like storage questions?
That's a great question. And that's definitely one of the biggest issues that a lot of moms are nervous about. Am I going to be able to leave enough milk for my son? Or for my baby. So believe it or not, but all breastfed babies up until 6 months take in the same amount of ounces per day. They take in anywhere between 27 and 30 ounces in a 24-hour period. Now that sounds kind of crazy if you think about it, that a 3-week-old and a 5-month-old would take in the same amount of milk. But with the 5-month-old, they tend to be a lot more efficient at nursing. And so they still need that same amount of milk. They're just able to get the fattier milk and all the different things in a shorter amount of time. All that being said, your average baby would need about an ounce per hour while you're away from them. So if you're going to be gone from, say, 8 to 5, that's 9 hours. So you could leave about 9 ounces, maybe an extra bottle, so maybe 12, just to have your bases covered in case baby's especially hungry that day, or your care provider reaches for the bottle before trying some other soothing techniques.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. I actually had no idea of that. I am a labor and delivery nurse, and so I really get to see like the first, few days of life. And then after that point, I'm just like, I have no idea what happens. And, especially being that I am not yet a mother of myself. So it's always a little strange for me, especially when I'm like, in the hospital and I have patients that ask me these kind of questions. I'm like, I have no idea. So I'm actually learning a lot as well about things that I have no idea what happened outside of like 3 days of life. So
yes, yeah. Until you introduce solids, they take the same amount. There's a lot of really interesting information on how your breast milk composition changes to meet the needs of the baby after as much as you can. So even for the moms who are exclusively pumping, by kissing their baby or kissing their baby's hands, they're actually taking in any pathogens that may be living on baby's skin. And if they're able to, they produce antibodies for those pathogens that are secreted through their breast milk. And even if they're pumping, even if baby doesn't get direct breast contact, you're still getting the immunological benefits of breastfeeding. So it's really fascinating.
Wow. So one lady, I guess she was feeding an older baby as well as feeding a newer baby. And so she wanted to know, I guess her older child is around toddler age, and then she has a newborn. So she wants to know, how can she set boundaries with her older child while nursing her new baby?
That's a great question. Tandem nursing is something I didn't personally experience, but I have a number of friends who nurse their newborn and their toddler at the same time. The nice thing about a toddler, even if it doesn't seem like it, is you can reason with them somewhat, more so than a newborn anyway. So often a lot of my girlfriends would either nurse the toddler only at certain times, so maybe only at nap time and only at bedtime, or they would actually do this thing where they would sing a song or count to 10, but because they were in control of say, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, they could speed it up or slow it down to whatever they felt like doing at that point. So because they were more in control, the toddler wasn't able to bear and nurse for, the whole day if the toddler wanted to. Just trying different strategies like that can be really helpful. There are actually books on night weaning for toddlers, but they're storybooks. They're not just books about how about how it should be done, but actually books that kind of explain night weaning, basically. So not feeding your toddler overnight. One that comes to mind is called Nurses When the Sun Shines. And it talks about only breastfeeding during the day and not so much at night. So there's a number of strategies that mom can employ in order to make sure that she's definitely fulfilling the needs of a newborn, but also so that her toddler gets some love too.
And what about, and this is actually a personal question for me, not something that the moms asked, but I've heard a lot of patients say something along the lines of they were suggested to stop breastfeeding while they were pregnant. Have you had that experience that moms were kind of suggested that they should stop breastfeeding when they get pregnant with their new child, or how does that work?
Sure. So when a woman gets pregnant, somewhere along the lines of her second trimester, whether she's lactating or not, her body will start to produce colostrum for the new baby. And colostrum tastes a lot different than mature breast milk does. So oftentimes those moms who decide to nurse through pregnancy, their older children or their babies will wean naturally because the taste of milk changes. And it's no longer kind of a sweet taste of what that baby is used to, and it turns into kind of thicker colostrum, which, as you know, as a labor and delivery nurse, has a laxative effect. So those toddlers tend to go to the bathroom a lot more. So sometimes they'll just kind of stop on their own, but other times they are asked to stop by their medical professional. There's a number of reasons for it. Some medical professionals say that later on, if you're late into your third trimester, for instance, the nipple stimulation from your child breastfeeding can trigger labor or trigger an early labor, or at least consistent contractions that can be done with labor. But a lot of women in the first and second trimesters, their nipples are so sensitive and their breasts really are so sensitive that the thought of their child putting their mouth on there several times a day just is enough to make them say, nope, it's time to stop. So some of it is for medical reasons. Other times it can be for personal reasons too.
If I, wanted to start a family later in life, and then that means, I want, say, 3, however many kids, then I have to kind of have kids kind of back to back and maybe not have that opportunity to breastfeed for as long as I want to. So have you experienced that? How do you help patients through that?
Yeah, I haven't experienced it with any clients, but it's definitely something that I'm seeing more and more of, either on blogs or Instagram, or just women, again, who are waiting to have children because for whatever reason, and that's absolutely the right to do. So I kind of go into those, I kind of look at it like this. Any milk that you can give your child is a blessing, and it's a good thing. So whether you're only breastfeeding your baby for 9 months or even 3 or 4 months, I think that you're still helping a lot of the gut maturity of an infant. They're definitely getting all the immunological benefits, and as a mother, you would also get the benefits of lowering your risk for certain types of cancers and things like that. So even if they feel like they're not hitting that goal with the first one, whenever they decide that, okay, this is my last baby, they may be able to feed that child for 9 months, 12 months, however long they want it to.
This is going to be probably one of the most common things that you ever get asked. Women want to know the signs of an upper lip tie and just things to do about it.
Sure, definitely. So just to back it up a little bit for anybody who may be watching that's not familiar, all of us are born with a little flap of skin underneath our tongue and also one underneath our lip. In some babies and in some people, actually, that little flap of skin is very tight, both underneath the lip and or the tongue, and that can really impede things like feeding. Signs of an upper lip tie can be a baby whose lips do not flange out when they're feeding. They should be flanged out. We call it fish lips. So babies should kind of have fish lips when they latch onto a breast or onto a bottle. But if a baby has an upper lip tie, then chances are that they're not really able to flange that lip out. So mom may notice some irritation on her nipples, or when baby takes the bottle, the milk kind of dribbles everywhere. In an older infant, especially one with teeth, one of the major signs is decay of the front teeth, because the milk or food or what have you will pull up underneath where that tie is, and it'll just kind of sit up against the teeth, and it can lead to some dental issues. Those are really 2 of the big ones. And there's similar symptoms for babies who have a tongue tie. That can be pain for mom when baby is at the breast. It can mean that, again, that they kind of dribble milk out when they're drinking from a bottle. In older infants, it can be speech or trouble with speech anyway. and also some dental issues. As their teeth come up, they don't quite come up the way that they should be. So those are some signs. And if you do think that your baby has a tongue or lip tie, work with the lactation consultant to get assessed. And then they should have a referral to either a pediatric dentist or a pediatric ENT who can diagnose and revise the tie if needed.
Obviously, there's lanolin and some other like nipple creams. Is there anything else in particular that you recommend for like cracked and blistered nipples?
Yeah, see a lactation consultant for sure. The creams and the ointments and all of those things do only so much, but definitely work with a lactation consultant or someone who's trained in breastfeeding to make sure that baby is latched right. Oftentimes, the easiest cure for sore nipples is really just adjusting position for mom. So a lot of times moms will start out sitting up like this, but if they don't have the proper support under baby, they tend to sort of hunch forward and lean forward with the weight of the baby during the feed. And so our nipple tissue is very stretchy, and oftentimes that goes with baby and doesn't stay with mom. But that being said, there's definitely some great products out there. I really recommend something called Polyform, which is antibacterial ointment. You can get it at just about any pharmacy. And if you do have any cracks or nipples, you can put a little bit of that on there just topically after you feed, and it'll help keep any nasty things away from any pets or sores that you have. I also really like recommending moms do a very dilute soap. So it's a quarter teaspoon of salt, table salt, sea salt, whatever you have, to 8 ounces of water, and then you just pour a little bit into shot glasses or Dixie cups, and you just hold them onto your nipples and you just recline back slightly. It feels really good, and salt has so many healing properties in it, so it helps promote healing as well. And so we recommend moms do that 2 or 3 times a day for maybe 5 minutes or so. It's very easy to overuse the salt and then end up with more cracks, and you don't want that either.
No, not fun. I always have this difficulty myself as a nurse, again, because I have not personally breastfed. And so I always struggle with the balance with moms. I know oftentimes if you are having a painful latch, there's something not working with the latch. However, I also know that, of course, you just had a baby and your nipples are sensitive. So I have a really hard time as a care provider assessing the difference between, okay, this is just sensitive and that's normal, and this is actually painful. So how do you kind of navigate that with patients?
That's a great question. And you know, that goes back to the whole breastfeeding shouldn't be painful. Well, it's going to be kind of painful, at least initially, because just like you said, your nipples are very sensitive. They don't get a lot of stimulation. But then when you have a newborn baby feeding 8 to 10 times a day for up to 45 minutes at a time, that's a whole lot of stimulation. So anytime that we see, and what we tell clients and what I tell pregnant moms is, if you notice that there's a change in your nipple shape or color where it comes out and it's either blanched or redder or lipstick shaped where it looks like it's increased, or you can see a line through it, a compression line in it, then it's time to get the latch evaluated for sure. If it's uncomfortable when baby first latches on, but that pain goes away within about 10 seconds or so, that's okay. That's within the realm of normal. We definitely don't want moms to be kind of curling their toes the whole time in pain, but we also know that it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable just because it's about a part of the body that doesn't get a whole lot of stimulation.
I know you can't probably speak for every single area in the country. And as a person like military hospital, lactation consultants are so readily available as far as if we don't have them on the floor, we have so many resources that we refer people out to. But what's been your experience on like the whole civilian side of things? Is it easy for people to access a lactation consultant? How can they do it? Even for maybe lower income families and things like that. How can people access that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, here in Austin, we're very resource rich, kind of like you are. All of the hospitals in the Austin area have lactation consultants on staff. Even our local children's hospitals for infants who are staying in the NICU or even the PICU have lactation consultants available to them. So we're very resource rich here. But I do know that there are areas of Texas where there's nothing. It's almost like a lactation desert. I have a good friend who's staying for a master's in public health. And this is something that's very near and dear to her heart. I was actually just talking to her about it yesterday. So it's funny you brought this up. So she's actually working on a report to come up and figure out where the lactation deserts are in order to better serve those moms, regardless of socioeconomic status and things like that. But if somebody wants to find a lactation consultant in their area, a really good website is ILCA, ILCA.org. And short for the International Lactation Consultants Association. They have a great lookup. Just about every lactation consultant I know is a member of ILCA. It's not our governing body, but it's a great organization to be a part of for a lactation professional. And so ILCA has a great lookup. You can put in your zip code and they will pull up lactation consultants within, 5, 10, 25, 100 miles of you. And so unfortunately, there are places in the country where there's only one lactation consultant within 100 miles. But I know that here in Texas, Texas WIC has a great breastfeeding program. And here in Austin specifically, we have a lactation resource center called Bumps and they're actually able to see all moms, regardless of whether they're with participants or not. So they can see any mom that needs lactation support, and you will be seen by a board-certified lactation consultant. They also have really knowledgeable, fantastic counselors there to provide support as well.
I will put that website as well on the show notes page. So if you're listening in iTunes or whatever platform, you can check out the show notes page and it will be there for you. Let's see. Tricks for weaning.
That's a good one.
Good one.
I went through that with my youngest. He probably would still be nursing if I had let him, but at 2.5, I was like, all right, I love you, buddy, but we got to stop this. And so, like,
I need a life.
I know. I was like, I need to not have my boobs out all over the place all the time, or at least that's how it felt. So, like I said, breastfeeding is a relationship, and it should be mutually desired by both parties in it. So, if mom wants to wean or has decided that it's time to wean because of another baby coming or what have you, some tricks that can really help are something called don't offer, don't refuse. And so, this tends to work really well with older babies for whom breastfeeding is not the primary source of nutrition. Mm-hmm. So, if your baby's over a year and doing really well on solids, I would recommend a method like this, where you don't offer breastfeeding, but if the baby wants to breastfeed or if your toddler wants to breastfeed, then you go ahead and you nurse them. Mm-hmm. Another thing is kind of the song trick that I had mentioned, where you sing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star or the ABCs for as long as you want. I've had some mom friends just actually put Band-Aids on their nipples and said, I have a boo-boo, we can't have nurses because mommy has a boo-boo or something like that. That can work really well with older children. But if you need to wean in a hurry for whatever reason and your child is young, there's different ways to do it. Probably the easiest way to avoid getting mastitis and plugged ducts and other things that can come along with not frequently expressing your breasts would be to pump to comfort. So if you feel like you're really full and engorged and your breast starts to feel achy, pump until you feel relieved, not to drain the entire breast. So for most women, that looks like just a couple of minutes instead of 15 or 20 minutes of pumping to drain the breast. So pumping to comfort is a really good way to do it. Cabbage leaves can help tremendously with engorgement. And I've read that some not over-the-counter, but behind-the-counter medications like Sudafed, for instance, or anything that has pseudoephedrine in it, that tends to dry moms up a lot. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the last resort that I've recommended for moms who need to wean for whatever reason. We try to pump to comfort and very slowly bring down the number of pumps, or we use cabbage leaves to help with engorgement.
Tips for moms who deliver premature.
See if you can get a breast pump as soon as possible. In the early days of breastfeeding, you're primarily making colostrum for the first, I'd say, 3 to 5 days or so. And so that colostrum can be really thick. It can be really hard to get out with a consumer-grade pump. But the hospital-grade breast pumps tend to have a larger motor in them, and they work a lot smoother. So you may be able to get that colostrum out using a hospital-grade pump. Hand expression is also another really good technique that I think breastfeeding moms should know, and that's actually just using your hands to very gently remove milk or colostrum from your breasts. A lot of moms of premature babies have found that this is kind of the best way to get colostrum out. And once their milk starts to increase in volume and turn into mature milk, they go on to use a hospital-grade pump. But I think pumping near your baby, if you're able to do that in the NICU, that would be great because, again, you can look at your baby. You can even, maybe get an article of unwashed clothing if your baby is wearing clothing and smell it. Just whatever you can do to kind of trigger that letdown. And I know a lot of NICUs, at least in the Austin area, do offer the availability to bring your breast pump into the NICU and sit there and pump, and they'll put up a divider or what have you to give mom some time.
Sure. I love hand expression for moms who have to be separated from babies, just because, I don't know if it's been your experience as an LC, but I'll have so many patients who are discouraged because, when you pump and you have colostrum, it's like, a couple drops and they get so discouraged and they're like, I'm not producing anything. And then you hand express and they're like, oh my gosh, I have milk. This is crazy. Yeah. So I love doing that with patients.
And I know the hospitals here in Austin do have hospital-grade pumps available for rent. The private practice that I work for also has pumps that we can rent out to clients who again need to increase their milk supply, or their regular pump just isn't working for them, or what have you. And as far as obtaining breast pumps through insurance, for instance, it's very helpful, I found, to have a doctor's note, so kind of like a prescription, just saying that this mom needs this brand of pump because she's going to be going back to work or what have you. But it really varies from insurance company to insurance company. Some will put you in touch with the DME, durable medical equipment suppliers, and you get to choose from a certain number of pumps. Others will just say, well, you go out and you buy the pump that you want and send us the receipt and we'll reimburse you 80% or what have you. So it's really a good idea for moms, especially those who are civilians, to reach out to their insurance company to figure out what is covered and what isn't. And then a really good time to do that is during your third trimester, especially if you haven't had the baby yet. I know that there's a certain window within which some insurance companies will cover pumps and other things that are needed for breastfeeding. But once you're outside of that window, it's a lot harder trying to get them to pay for it.
Some ladies wanted to know about some kind of like things to do as far as coping with being the sole provider for your child for 6 months. I mean, I know it's probably a lot of stress, lack of sleep, things like that. So what is your recommendation for that?
Yeah, I think having your partner help out, if at all possible. I know that for some moms whose partners are on active duty, that's not an option, unfortunately, especially if there's a deployment in play there. But trying to just take everybody up on the offer of help. So even if it's you feed the baby, somebody holds the baby for 2 hours while you go take a nap, just reach out to those people who have offered help. And I think taking them up on it would be great. There's also plenty of ways for partners or other family members to bond with baby that don't have to do with food necessarily. Baths and diapers are really great ways to do it. I know that was my husband's kind of primary way for bonding with baby when we were exclusively breastfeeding. And then once a bottle has been introduced, a mom should be able to pump, and then her partner or another family member should be able to offer a bottle at that time. But otherwise, just, hang in there, find other women who are breastfeeding or who are pumping, so you kind of have some camaraderie there of someone else who may be going through a bit of a struggle with trying to figure out how to not feel touched out all the time and the pressure of having to take enough milk for their baby and things like that.
Whenever you start pumping, and especially for moms who are going back to work and things like that, some moms who are working wanted to know about PACE bottle feeding, which is something that I don't know anything about. And then should you do it? How do you do it? That kind of thing.
Yeah, PACE bottle feeding is a very, very helpful tool to help minimize what's commonly referred to as nipple confusion. I call it nipple preference because that baby is not confused. They know exactly what they want. And so PACE bottle feeding, what it does is it mimics the breast behavior, but with the bottle. So when a baby's at the breast, and I'm sure you know this, so this might be more for people who are listening and watching, but when a baby is at the breast, they have to suckle in order to get that milk to flow and for that letdown. Once the milk starts to flow, they'll take a couple of suckles and swallows, and then they'll take a pause for about 10 seconds or so where they start suckling again to trigger another letdown. Many moms have multiple letdowns during a breastfeeding session and a pumping session as well. And so basically with PACE bottle feeding, we work those pauses in with the bottle. So we're going to pretend that this bottle of witch hazel is actually a bottle of milk. I have a bottle handy right now. It's in another part of the house. But basically what we would do is we tickle baby's lip with the bottle nipple. And once you see that baby open wide, you want them to latch on widely to the bottle nipple. Then what we'll do is we'll watch for 2 to 3 swallows, and then we'll either pick the bottle up so it touches the roof of baby's mouth, or remove it from their mouth completely. And then once they start to show signs of hunger again, you reward them by giving them the bottle again. And so it does take longer in order to give baby a bottle, but again, it helps reduce that nipple preference, and it helps reduce the confusion that baby may have, and it eases the transition between bottle and breast. They won't be impatient when they get back to breast and milk flowing right away.
Do you see that nipple confusion or nipple preference? I like that, by the way. Do you see that at any age, or, I hear it more commonly in like newborns, they get more of that versus an older child, or have you experienced it like throughout ages?
I've definitely seen it more with newborns than with older children. Older children seem to kind of make the connection that milk comes from mom, not necessarily from bottles. But newborns and younger babies, they're smart. They're all about working smarter and not harder. And so they know that milk will flow from the bottle. And so that's why they tend to either push off or get really fussy when mom tries to put them back on that breast and that milk isn't readily flowing. Mm-hmm. So I see it a lot more with newborns. So bottle feeding, if for some reason a mom is separated from her baby and the baby in the NICU is fed by bottle, you can request that the lactation consultant or the nurses use pace bottle feeding. And most of them do, because otherwise it's really easy to overwhelm the premature infant too.
How about, and this is another thing that's like a super hot topic, which is feeding in public. I mean, I literally just saw on the news today, I didn't read the whole article, so I don't want to speak on it because I don't want to get it wrong, but the title alluded to a woman was breastfeeding at a pool. Somebody called the cops, and then a group of moms came and breastfed together. So tricks for moms who are feeding in public, maybe getting pushback, or maybe they're nervous to feed in public.
Yeah, that's a great question. This is something, so at the practice I work at, we offer a free weekly breastfeeding group, and this topic comes up very, very, very often. Usually moms are just a little nervous that somebody's going to say something to them or ask them to leave, because again, on social media, we see the stories like that where police are called for a mom feeding her baby, which is the most crazy thing I've ever heard. But I know. It happens periodically. I mean, it even happened here in Austin at a Victoria's Secret of all places, and it ended up making Saturday Night Live. Like, it was the butt of a joke on Saturday Night Live that a woman was kicked out of Victoria's Secret for feeding her baby. But anyway, my point being that in the, with both children, I fed combined for 4 years. In those 4 years that I've breastfed, nobody has ever said anything to me. Not good, not bad. I'm sure I must have gotten my fair share of looks, but really, I tried to focus on my baby when I was feeding him in public. I also put on what I call my RBF, my resting bee face. And so this way, if people were like looking at me, I kind of have this stern look on my face and nobody ever said anything to me. The other thing that you can do is sometimes it can be helpful to go out with, a group of other moms who are nursing their babies. And there's something to be said for strength in numbers. I can tell you, though, that as of just a couple of weeks ago, it is now legal to breastfeed in all 50 states. So all 50 states have rules in place that do not make it illegal to breastfeed in public. Not all of those states have enforcement laws, so there's not really a whole lot you can do if somebody asks you to leave a place for breastfeeding. But at least the law is on the books. But it's really important to know what the law is in the state that you live in, becoming a part of your local breastfeeding coalition, and just kind of learning more about what people do to help support and protect and promote breastfeeding. That can really help you feel more confident in your choice of going out and breastfeeding public. But as I said, at the end of the day, it's just a mom feeding her baby, and really nobody wants to hear that baby scream. So if they see a smidge of side boob, it's not the end of the world. At least that's how I look at it. Yeah. But I think confidence comes with time as well, and the more that you do it, the more confident that you'll get.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's one of those things, and it's all over social media, and it's talked about. But it is one of those things that you're like, it's 2018, so I'm confused about why this is even a question. Like,
exactly.
Very confusing.
Far worse things out there to get angry about. Yeah.
Right. Speaking of, and I was like, I don't know if this will come up, but have you been following the World Health Organization, the breastfeeding resolution?
Yes.
Do you have any insight on that or anything that you would like to say about that?
Yeah, I do. So I definitely don't think that the information put forth by Colombia, I think it was Colombia Ecuador, I'm sorry, Ecuador in South America. I don't think that anybody wanted to take away formula. Even as a lactation consultant, I have told a ton of my clients that you have to give the baby formula, because at the end of the day, you have to feed baby and make sure that they're growing. If the milk supply isn't there for whatever reason, it's not there, and we need to make sure that baby is fed. So I don't think that the verbiage was anything to restrict access to formula. It was more to regulate things like formula marketing. I'm sure some of your clients, your patients that you see in the hospital have told you about receiving free formula samples in the mail while they're pregnant. Well, those, unfortunately, they're not really free. The cost gets rolled into formula for people who actually need it. And so it's these frees that really kind of drive up the cost of formula and really make it harder and not quite as adaptable to those who truly do need it for their infants to survive. So I think that the regulation of formula marketing is, it's a good thing. Nobody wants to take it away, at least not me. And as I said, I refer to it and I recommend it to clients pretty frequently.
Sure. And so what you're saying literally is that the free formula that they give in the mail or at the doctor visits, whatever, they're actually just inflating the cost of the formula in stores.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting.
And so, somebody has to pay for it. And unfortunately, it's usually the consumers and the people who do need to buy formula for their babies to survive.
Yeah, I've definitely seen a lot of maybe not so much now, but again, when I first started out as a labor and delivery nurse about 2.5 years ago, like so many like free bags and free this and free that given out to patients during their doctor visits and things like that, or in the mail or whatever. So one last thing I want to kind of touch on again, and we did start talking about that, but you did mention before we started recording that this was like one thing that you definitely like to touch on, which is breastfeeding and pumping whenever you're going back to work. So any other things that you want to add about that, tricks for that?
Yeah, definitely. Something that all of my mamas, that I tell all of my mamas to do is to make sure that they are able to talk with their supervisor, their HR person, whoever, before they have that baby. It can be an awkward conversation, but on your first day back at work, when you're really overwhelmed at having to leave your baby at daycare or with a care provider, the last thing that you want to do is have to figure out, okay, well, where the heck do I go to pump my breasts? But once you know where that room is, as long as had that conversation with your supervisor, so that there's literally no surprises when you get back. And that, I think anything that you can do to make that transition back to work a little bit easier, whether it's talking to your supervisor or figuring out meal prep with your partner or what have you, anything you can do to make that first day and those first weeks back easier is a good thing. That's probably my favorite tip.
I think that a lot of people don't know this. I actually was talking to one young lady at work who is currently pumping, and she was kind of talking about how she felt like, I mean, as a nurse, and this is not just nursing, I mean, there's so many jobs that you're super busy, but she just felt like she could not get that time to get away and pump. But I was, kind of talking to her, and I don't know all of the like laws and the regulations and things like that, but can you kind of just basically give us the info on things that your employer has to do for you legally, and what you are entitled to as a breastfeeding mom?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a federal law that applies to non-exempt or hourly employees that work for employers with 50 or more employees. So basically, if you are an hourly employee or a non-exempt employee and your company is more than 50 people, by law, your employer has to provide you with a private place to pump that's not a bathroom. That private place has to be lockable and out of sight from other employees and the public. And also, they have to give you as many breaks as needed to pump during the first 12 months of your baby's life. Those breaks, however, are not paid. So you may have to clock out or make up your time at the end of the day or what have you. And that's the federal law. I do know that there are several states in the country that have laws similar to that and that have extended that federal law kind of to public employees who may not be hourly. They may be exempt employees and salaried employees. So it's really a good idea to check with your local state along with the federal law. New Jersey, I know, is one that has a law in the books for all pumping moms, regardless of exempt or non-exempt status. So definitely check it out. There's a website that has a lot of great information, and I want to say it's ncsl.org. And so if you want to Google work laws US, you'll get a great website that has all of the information for every state out there.
Sure. Cool. And I will try and find that website and plug it into the show notes page. So if you're listening or watching and you would like to check that out, hopefully that will be there for you. Anything else, any other resources that you want to mention or anything like that before we head on out?
Yeah, there are actually a couple of really, really great websites that provide evidence-based information for moms on breastfeeding. Sorry, there's
no, it's okay.
Going on outside the door. Okay. No, there are several websites that are really great and provide evidence-based information for mom. My favorite one is one called kellymom.com, and it's written by a lactation consultant, and it has literally everything you could want to know about breastfeeding ever. Everything from, is it safe for me to dye my hair while I'm breastfeeding? Can I get a tattoo? Can I take this cold medicine? And just, it gives a really great realistic expectation of what to expect for the first several weeks and really several months of breastfeeding too. There's also a section that talks about pregnancy while breastfeeding, breastfeeding while pregnant, tandem breastfeeding a newborn and toddler. So it has a lot of great information in there. And I know I personally refer to it a lot and send clients links with more information on it.
Cool. Well, Naya, how can people connect with you on social media or in general?
Yeah, so on social media, I have an Instagram called It's More Than Milk. You'll put it in the show notes. But It's More Than Milk is my Instagram handle. And I think that's how we connected, actually. So that's my Instagram handle. It's morethanmilk.com is my website that offers a list of all the services I provide. I do offer online classes, prenatal and back to work classes. So if any of the people listening would love to learn more from me, I'd be happy to help them and support them through that process. And you can find links to all of my social media on the website as well.
Sure. Well, Naya, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me, Becca.